Delight Your Marriage, Episode 10.
Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hey, how are you? I wish I could hear you respond, but unfortunately I'm just looking into a microphone right now. But this is Belah Rose, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today I have got a really great interview. It's the first half of Carrie from nbsp.com, and she really shares about how difficult it was for her to achieve orgasm for the first time. I mean, that is such a common story. My goodness, that's my story. That's so many women's story. In fact, there's a large percentage of women that even now, Christian or non-Christian, do not orgasm. And so Carrie gives some really great tips, not only from her own life of how she was able to work through that, but also she shares about how she's able to present sex in such a positive light for her own kids. Because if you think about it, a lot of our hangups with sex honestly started from our parents. So, obviously parents, I'm sure they're well-meaning and they just didn't want you to explore before you were allowed to or whatever. But the issue is we need to stop the cycle and we need to turn it around. And so Carrie gives some really great insights about that, but also just how to get through in your mind in order to enjoy making love to the extent that you can literally achieve this wonderful physical experience. I also just want to mention that Carrie is so open and vulnerable with her heart and her experiences because she wants to help other women that have gone through similar experiences. So listen in, open your own heart to her, and see what God might teach you through her story. All right. Well, welcome back, Delight Your Marriage listeners. I'm so glad you've joined us today. You are in for a treat. Here I have Carrie with the Intimate Couple, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her marriage and her marital story. So welcome, Carrie. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks, Belah, for inviting me to be part of this. I'm actually looking forward to it.
I'm so glad. And I'd love for you, Carrie, to go ahead and introduce yourself and your family and a little bit about your day-to-day life.
Sure. Okay, so I'm very happily married to my husband, Jim. We've been married for over 32 years, and we have a large family. We actually have 9 children, and our oldest and youngest are the girls, and we have 7 boys in between. So it's quite it's almost like a baseball team, or that's what a lot of people tell us. It's just our oldest daughter is 30 and our youngest daughter is 15. And so it's like every other year we have another baby. We feel like that's our claim to fame, a large family, because that's pretty unique these days. But I happen to be the oldest of the 8 children, and my husband is the youngest of 7. So we were both grew up with big families, so it didn't seem strange to us. But we are so blessed, and 5 of our sons are married, and we now have 8 grandchildren. The oldest is 5, and then they go younger. In fact, last year was quite a busy year for us because in 2014, we had 2 of our sons get married, and we had 3 new grandchildren. So that was just a stellar year for us. But our family actually now totals 24, if you count all the in-laws and the grandchildren. So we are so blessed. I currently work part-time as an office manager at the church, and my husband is a pastor of the church. The church is probably about 600-700 people, and we are super busy with that. And I really do like working behind the scenes. I like doing administration stuff, which is really actually I think our family benefited because of the fact that I like making charts and lists. That's my thing, and so our family fridge always had a chore chart on it. So our kids, any of our kids would say, well, whose turn is to empty the dishwasher? It's not my turn. They had the chart they could look at, but it didn't mean that the work always got done, but it helped. And with a large family and a lot of boys, you just had to do that. But So I do enjoy administrative tasks. And my husband, Jim, he's the lead pastor at the church. He was our church has a Christian school as well, running like 33 or 4 years. And Jim was the principal of the school for 20 years. So he's very much a teacher by motivation, but also very much a leader. And so he has now been the lead pastor for 13 years. And I really do enjoy serving alongside him. And it just, with a large family and with both of us being involved in the church quite heavily, we are really, really busy.
Yes.
And so then on the side, we actually, as you mentioned, the Intimate Couple, it was in 2007, so do the math, I guess that's about a little over 7 years ago, we started a website purely as a hobby. It grew out of a passion, but it was for couples, especially to provide resources, just writing lots of articles. It wasn't just targeting sexual intimacy, but we wanted that to be part of it. But it was just about intimacy in marriage. And so that's kind of what we do on our day off. We try to work on that a bit, and it's fun for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it definitely sounds like you're incredibly busy, Carrie, and it sounds like you, as your administrative gifting, has really allowed your family to even thrive in the midst of how much business. I mean,
yes,
I'm in New York City, so there's the normal family is 1.5 kids probably, and
sure, yes, yeah.
Even to manage that is a struggle. But then a website, a church, and an additional 8 children is quite a bit.
I fit in some childcare, babysitting, and for our grandkids. But Jim and I are looking forward. We are leaving next week. We're going to go, just the two of us. We're going to go to Cancun, Mexico for a little vacation. So that's going to be fun.
That is wonderful. Just the two of you. Wow.
Yeah.
Would you share with us, as we're getting started with the inspiration, would you share with us a scripture or quote that has meant a lot to you over the years or even recently?
Sure. Okay, so I've got the scripture is from Proverbs 19, verse 11. That is something that we have tried to apply in our marriage. And it says, a man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Mm. And it's right in line with that, Ruth Bell Graham, who said, a happy marriage is the union of two good forgivers. And they tie together because overlooking an offense is often tied to forgiveness. And I wouldn't say that our marriage has had really serious challenges of needing forgiveness. There hasn't been unfaithfulness or, some of those things would be very difficult. But in day-to-day living, I'm sure you know about that, it's easy for a husband or wife to, hurt one another in a smaller way or to offend. And, it could be that I'm feeling sort of slighted or ignored, or though, Jim's not really paying attention to me right now the way I would want him to. I don't feel that he's really doing what he should. Well, it's not been difficult for me to choose to just think the best about him, and instead of holding that as a grudge against him, it's just overlook that, because you could be having grudges upon grudges upon grudges easily in a marriage, and it's just to choose to think the best. And maybe I've spoken something kind of unlovingly tone or nagging is easily done. But Jim, he's been so gracious, and he might recognize that Carrie's tired, or I just need to give her a helping hand. She's feeling pressure right now, or just try to be understanding and overlook the offense. And it's in a very many ways just forgiving one another. And I'm not saying you never talk about things and address issues that you need to. Someone's not understanding the other. That's good. It's not like putting things under the carpet, but I think that patience and forgiveness tied together. So that's been very I don't know, I wouldn't even say it's an earmark of our relationship, but if I think about success over 32 years, I really cannot think of something that really irks me about Jim. And I feel cherished. That's what, when I think of what my husband is like, I feel that he cherishes me. I don't think about, he annoys me about this and this, or I 15 years ago he said that, or I can't remember those, and that is so. I feel like it's given us such a good, solid marriage. Yeah, so that's a bit of inspirational there for you.
I love it. That's just so true, and it's just such golden advice to really overlook an offense. In the midst of 32 years, however, I'm sure there's been ups and downs and all arounds and struggles and here and there. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about a season or a struggle that your marriage went through and how you overcame that.
Sure. For me, the area of sexual intimacy has not been really easy. I'm typical to, I think, a lot of women in that I find it's challenging to come to orgasm myself. It's not that I'm not in there are women who've not experienced it before, and we get women who will write into our website and want advice about that, and we don't we're not sexual therapists or anything like that, but when I look back, I realized that as I grew up, the culture of our family was we didn't talk about sex. It was not it was taboo, and maybe there are other women that can relate to that. But sometimes there's almost a danger, I think, in a Christian family that will happen, and I think it's damaging if you don't. There's a right way to talk about it, and so me being the oldest of 8 children, when I got married, I did not know what an orgasm was. I didn't know that that's something that people experienced, and I knew that how babies were conceived, and that was about it. No conversations with my mom, and so no girlfriend talks or anything. And we didn't we didn't even have pre-marriage classes that would talk about that. So that was maybe got me off onto not a very great start. I also grew up where modesty was, for me personally, was it was not in such a healthy way. It was seemed to be tied in with embarrassment, and modesty. There's a good kind of modesty, but there's the kind where it's gone too far. So even our wedding night was a huge overcoming. I mean, I don't have any regrets, but I think that it wasn't really God's design that it had to be so difficult for me, and so it's easy for even now I can easily tie sex with negative kind of feelings. And meanwhile, it's lovemaking with my best friend and my lover, and so I've learned. So I'd say that it wasn't. Obviously, we've got lots of children. We've had sex often.
At least
so it's
times.
not that it's not that it didn't work at all, but it wasn't fulfilling. And but I'm so glad that Jim, he really was gracious and patient, and then I can't remember when. It might have been, it was somewhere between 5 and 10 years of marriage. We read the book His Needs, Her Needs, and it sort of opened my eyes to the fact that sexual intimacy could be a need, and actually for my husband it is. And so even then to start to understand that it's important. It's not just something that is lesser or almost negative. So I mean, I knew it in my head, but to really change my attitude took a bit of time. So things that helped me were just that my husband and I were really open and talking to each other. And it wasn't in like, oh, we've got this great big problem, but it was just like, we just want this area to be better for us. So what do we like? And so things like reading some books. I still remember the very first book. We were probably 10 years married. I think it's called Intended for Pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I had never even dared to look at a book about sex or anything. Like growing up was like, you don't look at stuff like that. But it was, so I still remember I saw it on the book table at this conference, and I said to my husband, I said, why don't we buy this? And so just starting to talk, read, try to learn a bit, and start trying things. And I know for me, like initiating sex has been a really important thing for me to do. And it's like our sex is so great, and it's like God has certainly helped us along the way. And I know my husband, he feels really, really happy with how we've moved in that area. So, but it was almost like I wouldn't say it was so difficult for me. It was probably more difficult for my husband because he didn't want to put pressure on me. But I wasn't understanding that this is like a gift for married couples to enjoy. And so we have a very healthy sexual relationship now. So that's all good.
Well, that is just so valuable to share. And I just really appreciate it because there's so many of our listeners as well as myself that really have had very similar stories. And I'm interested in how, well, first off, when you talked about there's a right way of talking about sex, and in the family that you grew up in, it was really talked about or not talked about at all. Right. And so as a mother of so many, and, there are definitely mothers that are listening, how would you suggest they talk about sex with their kids?
Well, in our family, we've had it that I get to talk to our daughters, and we tied it in with, for the girls to, not be surprised when they have their period for the first time. But so kind of tying in with that, we happened to pick up a resource somewhere that was kind of, we could follow a book. It was like a children's level. We made it that it was like a special time where it was private, no embarrassment. And if I remember, it was like really special for both with my daughter who's now 30 and with my 15-year-old. So they were probably like around 8, 9, 10 in that age. But I think the two conversations were different because times have changed. With my daughter who's 15, I remember talking to her about things like, inappropriate touching, and that, like, I wanting her to know that, there's evil out there too, but like not in a fearful way, but still, whenever there's anything uncomfortable, and so I'm really glad that both of my daughters have been open with me and they feel comfortable. It's almost like you're setting the ground instead of other people starting to put influence and thoughts. And it was before the girls even thought or knew anything. It was like, hey, this is something that you don't know, but let me tell you about it. And it's really special. I'm really using words like special and God's design and how it's beautiful. But I know it took several hours, and maybe even I think we had because we couldn't do it all in one session. We said a little code word was, "Shall we go and have some hot chocolate?" And then if I said that to my daughter, she knew that it was like, yeah, let's go and keep reading that book, or we keep doing the talk. But it was like, good to talk about any kind of issues that are related to sex, or the whole, there's negative things too that we talked about, but really emphasizing God's gift. design.
I love that, Carrie, because it just gives just such a good framework for your daughters to then learn about sex through, in that
Yes.
this is the proper context, that it's special, that it's God's design in marriage. I mean, it's just wonderful that, as you said, you were able to set the framework versus maybe Google setting it, or their friends, or, crude jokes at school or something like that.
Exactly.
So,
For my husband, he would take out the boys and sometimes do a couplet together, and so I was never there to watch, but I know that there's such like because right from there it was talking about even things like talking about masturbation or pornography. Like before, I don't know. I think it's so healthy. I'm not saying that my sons have never had issues of any kind, but they are totally open with their father. Wow. And I mean, even to me somewhat, that it's just like I don't know, we just didn't want it all to be in such a negative context. There's the negative aspects, but let's talk about it with positive. It makes a difference. It really does.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I'm interested actually, I have two sons. So
okay.
I'm very interested in thinking about what it is like for sons, because like you, I grew up very sheltered. And then after reading books like His Needs, Her Needs, and Intended for Pleasure and those kinds, the whole understanding of, wow, this is a wonderful aspect of my husband that I just had no idea about, that it's a really godly, wonderful thing. So I'm interested in how a little bit more about that, if you could, about how the boys kind of processed sex as young men, because the interest is, I mean, my little boys are itty bitty. I've got a 6-month-old and a 6-week-old and a year and a half old.
Oh,
and
well, congratulations!
Thank
wow.
you. It's so fun.
Yeah,
it really is.
Super.
But their interest in their extra part is immediate, So, how do you? What happens when they get older? And
yeah, well, it's keeping communication, and like there is, like, especially now with internet and everything, there's so much temptation out there. So we use Covenant Eyes as a filter for accountability on all of our family computers and personal computers and iPhones or whatever. But and we're able to do that not as like, oh, here, this minute, we're going to slap some rules on here. It's because we want you to be such a godly man and to be really prepared for marriage, for that you don't have any kind of regrets. And at the church, we've actually offered courses. There's one that I think has come out of Australia called The Valiant Man. And it's so much, it teaches about how the brain works and, things that cause arousal or whatever. But in a safe setting, like it's either just a bunch of young men or a bunch of married men, and it's such like an openness that happens. And so all of our sons have gone through that, and some are now even facilitating the course. But it's quite easy in that it's, you just pop in a DVD and listen to the speakers that are doing the training. But I don't know, like just sort of challenging our sons to not just be, what we so often see as not healthy, but to really be leaders that God wants them to be. So there's, of course, it's not like, I don't want to get a picture that, our family's all perfect and we never, have any kind of sin in our lives or anything like that. But there's constantly communication going on, and it's going in the right direction. And I was really glad that at the probably around 9-10 years old, their father was having a conversation with them. And yeah, so I feel like we're really reaping some good fruit from that as they're becoming young men and fathers themselves, which is, I know that when I think about our marriage and what kind of positive things it's produced, the fact that we've got a solid marriage has been such an example for our kids. And what I love is when our married kids will tell their friends who maybe are struggling in an area of relationship, say, my parents have a website. You should see some articles there. Like they're not embarrassed at all by our website. They are
wonderful.
Like, they're telling other people about it, but it could be so different. And I think just the openness we've had as our kids are growing up, and that we're private about, Jim and I, for our relationship, we're not like doing anything that belongs in privacy. It happens privately. But,
yeah, right.
But as far as conversation, at appropriate times or before any of our kids got married, or they knew that they could ask us questions, and it's such a blessing to be able to invest in your children that way. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, that's incredible, Carrie. And I'd love to move on to
Sure.
hear a little bit more about what maybe habits or guidance, kind of practical guidance, could you give a wife struggling in the same area of intimacy?
Yeah, I think it's communication with your husband, and sometimes it's hard to just even start talking. Like, what should we talk about? We know it's sex, and it's about feeling fulfilled, and then that can be hard to just know what do we start with. So I think finding a book, finding a website, reading an article together, and then start saying, okay, what do we take away from this? So what do you think stood out in this article? It's, even if that's just a springboard to conversation, but and I think also too, when you're talking with your husband, don't think of this as a problem or an issue, as though it's your own problem or that it's his problem. This is something that you both are going to face, but you're on the same side of it. Like, if it's sort of out in front of you, that whatever aspect of, for me, it was just trying to get over the negative connotations that seem to be in my head, as though sex is kind of dirty, or, not really supposed to be doing, all of that, I'm sure was preventing me from having orgasms. It's pretty hard to, when you've got negative feelings, it's going to impact how your body responds. Yep. And so because I think, for Jim and I, we just would talk about it. We didn't find any little tricks of press this or, stroke that, or it wasn't there's some of that happening, but it wasn't as though this was this is a clue. I could sell that now for $99 and I'll tell you what that clue is. It's not like that at all. It's so it is communication, and it's a lot of my thoughts, just changing my thinking, because it's amazing how that impacts. So for Jim and I too, I feel like we both understood that I was the one that had to learn it mostly, is the importance of sex in a marriage. And so when you start to understand that, and you prioritize it, then it seems to, like, it happens more often, and things start to work a bit better.
Mm.
As the practice makes perfect kind of thing too. Well, it's not perfect yet, but it's much, much better. And so there's not like just one little clue, but really the thoughts, guarding, not having them, the lies or the untruth influence in an improper way what happens in our bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really great to hear, Carrie. And I just want to sum up some of the things that you just talked about. You said that start by reading together to make that a springboard in conversation so that can open up communication. I think that's a great tip for women.
Yeah.
So if it's not already something that you can openly talk about, maybe you can pull up an article or, open a chapter that you say, well, let's go through this a little bit. And that might give some language to some of your feelings even. And then you mentioned don't think of it as your problem or his problem. It's something that you're working on together, and you're working together to get it even better. I love that, because it really can seem like, well, he's not doing what I really need him to. And it can become tension when instead, I wonder if you would say that it's a process that God wants us to kind of get through and do together and grow in intimacy in those areas.
Oh, absolutely. I also have recognized in our marriage that anything that might be like a conflict, whether it's like, I'm not talking about, just a disagreement that was like, oh, we got over it in 2 minutes, but something that was a little bit tougher, more challenging to work through. It doesn't have, like, it's not as though, well, let's avoid that now because that's going to make our marriage worse. No, like, the process of working through that in a healthy way can actually, we found, make you closer afterwards. Like, I mean, you learn so much about each other, and you learn to understand, and you learn to listen, and it doesn't have to be like you. So even if there's a struggle in sexual intimacy for a couple, don't think, oh, well, we're doomed. It's not like that at all. It's like, no, you've got your work cut out for you to communicate, but you're going to come out on the other side even better for it, having had to work through that.
I love that. It's definitely been something important in my marriage as well, where it's just, you've got to realize that each struggle, it's actually probably the struggle has been there the whole time, and it's actually been kind of separating the two of you until you actually can kind of wrestle through it together. And I don't mean wrestle in an arguing way. I just mean like, this is something you both need to get your hands dirty and have some vulnerability, and it's going to be messy and it's not going to feel good.
For sure.
And you're probably going to cry.
Yes. Get the Kleenex box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Prepare for all of those things. But
yes, sure.
I mean, really, that's what intimacy is about, is being open and bearing your soul and your personhood with this other person. I just love that. And just to also mention that you said, get over the negative connotations of sex. And I think that's a very important process that every, especially Christian woman that maybe was raised in the church, or someone that's come out of a lot of, sexual sin like myself, I also had to get over the negative connotations because I had to recognize the sin and recognize that, okay, that's under the blood. That's what Jesus was able to forgive me of. And then move into, this is a holy, wonderful thing with my husband that's ordained by God. So I think on both sides of that, the connotations really a process a wife needs to go through. And then the last thing you mentioned was the importance of sex in marriage and to prioritize that.
Yes, for sure. You summarized that really well for us.
Thanks, Carrie. Now, we're stopping the interview here because the second half is coming out on Thursday, and I don't want you to miss it because Carrie talks about the 3 reasons for her marital success. And she also shares a tip about intimacy that honestly I didn't think of much at first, but it has been a great support to our intimacy. So I don't want you to miss that because it is really good stuff. The other thing I don't want you to miss is I'm doing a drawing in a week for the Delight Your Husband course. It helps a woman go through or get past all of her reservations about sex, intimacy, and the different flavors of sex. And specifically, I go into great detail in the actual physical responses for penilingus. So if you don't know what penilingus is, I encourage you to go to delightyourhusband.com and find out exactly what that is, because I talk about positions and techniques and really in-depth look at what a woman needs to get past in her own mind in order to get to a place of being able to really delight her husband. Now, for the next week, if you review the podcast on iTunes, then you will be entered into a drawing to get the Delight Your Husband course for free. The way to do it is review the podcast, then take a screenshot on either your phone or your computer, and then tweet it at Delight Marriage. Once again, you review the podcast on iTunes, take a screenshot, and then tweet that screenshot at Delight Marriage. Now, the reason it's important to take the screenshot is because iTunes, for whatever reason, doesn't post a review right away. So I want to make sure I see it right away and that you are entered into the drawing. So just take this as your inspiration. If you think you're going to forget, why not do it right now? That would be amazing. And then you can tweet it to me and I will get it. Now, if you don't have Twitter, feel free, just email it at belah@delightyourmarriage.com. If you're not totally sure how to do each of these steps to enter to win, just go to delightyourmarriage.com and there's a link on the right-hand side, right on that homepage that says enter to win. And I will have all of the details there for you. Very easy, step by step. Thank you so much for taking the time to write a review for me. It really encourages me, and it also makes it so that other people can see the podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time. And if you meant to review and you just haven't yet, why not take now as the inspiration to go ahead and do it and get entered to win an amazing resource for your marriage. Thank you again. God bless you, and I'm praying for you and your marriage and your walk with God. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Stop by delightyourmarriage.com to check out all the show notes, as well as many more resources and articles. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.